is not good. You're using computer order. Are we good?
Yep.
That means nothing happened until now.
That means meaning the few minutes, for the 1 minute that Bob got, we lost, but that's it.
That's going to fall out again. You realize it's a loose connection.
Usually fall out unless people kick it. We'll be fine now.
So we'll put it here. Those I know. Okay. So the Meiser, so what I'm raised before is it's a royal adam. It doesn't say it's a chayva, but it seems to say there's a religious value. And obviously you want to know what's the mucker. Very nice for him to say so, but what's the mucker? Is he giving Eitzah Taivis? What's he doing here when Rambam writes royal adam? You must do your best. Okay, if someone's going to tell you, well, you should do your best. Maybe matter the saguna. What's your best? Timer Michael, you know what I mean? Yeder Shmendrik Adam has to do the kfi koichai. Now, what does it mean? That means you guys, I don't know how much you know, but the kfi koichachem, you're supposed to figure out there's some kind of shayfin yonim of Taamei Hamitzvos. Taking for granted that you're illiterate and we're not talking about some chimpanzee walking into the room. Then you have some background in the background of whatever this is about the discipline, and now you're supposed to do whatever you can. Would you say that for paskin the halacha? Are you kidding? Brother dear, there's objective data. You have to total command material, you have to be able to talk the object what your subjective understanding of the objective meaning of the text is. And if you can only say a maybe, you don't pass in the shaila. It's good for saying a shir, whatever that is called, but it's definitely not for passing a shaila. It's mutter, it's usher. She's mutter, she's usher. She's not. These are the things you then say. Well, according to the Brisker Rav, that's not going to work. You know what I mean? I was once in a car, and these two fresh dayanim were there, and I was cracking up. They were talking about migu schusataina and schusataina. And I looked at guys, I don't know if you realize it, maybe you should let this Narishkeit stop and read Kloli Migu the Shach, which is 2 pages long with small letters. Know that, then talk about Migu. Ayingala. And you're going to paskin a shayla. Thank God they don't have Chashemishput over there too much. You know what I mean? What does he know? Before you know the Kloli Migu the Knesset Agdoila, before you know the Kloli Migu the Shach, you close your mouth, you don't go near the entire, which means to say, now you understand why it's certain, but they did him in America. Don't go there. Okay? You have to make sure that they know something, not just their lawyers or things like that. Let's get back to the board. This is very important to understand. So what does Rambam mean? Then he continues and says, if he's something which he can't find a reason which he can subjectively get to, or he can't find a siba, okay, a tam, a siba, and let him not say, well, if that's the case, it's meaningless. If the God says that I have the right to look for subjective reasons, can't find one, yeah, so subjectively, this is meaningless to me. Very, very interesting. So he says, Al Yaros Lalot Bel Hashem, don't, it's like the Lush of the Mikra, don't, Behar Sinai, you put a gedder, Bahar Sinai, Pen Yaharsu, lest they will destroy themselves actually and come up to the Kodesh. If you look at the Pasuk, it's in Israel. Okay, Pen Yifroitz Bam, Mamish the Pasuk by here by Matan Torah, which is Hagbel Taharahu, Pen Yifroitz, etc. Velotia Machshavto Bo Kim Machshavto B'Shad Yivrei Chol. Like if something in Divrei Chol, if you don't understand it, okay, you don't relate to it. Here, take for granted. You'll never really understand it. So even what you understand, you don't understand. What you don't understand, what's the difference? He's basically saying the reasons are beyond you, my dear friend. And therefore, when you subjectively can or cannot attain mitzvahs, don't suddenly be lightheaded about it. Because at the end of the day, they're only, whatever they are, the religious value is a subjective attachment to mitzvahs. But objectively, it's beyond you. Simple as that. You can't find a reason. Thank you. So you can't. It's independent. In other words, what we're seeing here in Rambam is no one is saying that a man is commanded or even suggested or even we think that he will know the true reasons of why God commanded A, B, and C. The best he can do is have a subjective reason that he can figure out according to his capabilities. And you are commanded to do your best. Now you have to figure out what's the source and why. Granted. But basically he's saying at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether you understand it or not, because there's obviously a reason there which is beyond your comprehension. That's what he's saying. Don't be mizalzen it like in different chayot. Understand this is dvarim shebekdusha. He says, just think of the Torah was makpid on meila and using different hegdish. If there's basically nothing more than still matter, right? Wood, stones, dust, ashes. If you just use words, Kedushas Peh is very magic. Ramban's Shita is that there's no Me'ilah without Kedushas Peh. If something is Nikna B'chotzer Hegdish, it belongs to Hegdish, but there's no Me'ilah. It's a Ramban Bobatzer. Okay? But so there's a lot of Me'ilah demands Kedushas Peh. So the Rambam is Medayik that way. It's with Kedushas Peh. Niskachu, they are now transcendent, and therefore you can't go near them. They're beyond you. They're out of your reach. So he says, and if you act like it as if it's not transcendent, Ma'al Bashem, you have basically you have betrayed your covenantal relationship with God. Forget, but Misa, I hate to say it, it's Misa de Shemai. It's Karen, Chaimish, Va'asham, it's a ganze Geschäft. Kal v'chaimer le'mitzvahs, shechaka kulanu HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shelo yiv'ot adam behem, don't kick them away from you, pipnei shelo yadat ta'amam, because you can't comprehend its reason. Lo yichaped dvarim asher lokein al Hashem. Don't say, well, God obviously does something here which is illogical. Hello, who are you talking about? Don't be mamit in the mitzvahs, because they're not relevant today for whatever reason it be. Hello, what are you talking about? Who are you talking about? So he says, "V'lo yachshav b'hem machshavto k'divrei chol." Halo ne'emar b'Torah, "B'shmartem et kol chukotai v'et kol mishpatai v'asitem otam." What does shmartem mean? We know that in the brisos of Sinai, it's one day you'll learn more in Sot and Shvus, right? There's X amount of brises on every essay and license. There's a bris of lilmoid v'lasos lishma v'lekayim. I don't know if you know that. You have a krisis bris that you have to learn every mitzvah. You're mechuyev to learn, and if you don't do it, you're breaking a bris. You know, if this can people don't hop the chayva of limud. Get the shinanton levanecha. As much as the din of lilmud for a krisis bris, zachem in the cave of cotton v'godler chayvin. I know to tell you, lilmud. That means either you know all the pirtei halachas of kol Torah kula, or you know the gemaras. Decide which one you want. I don't know what's better for you. There's a bris called lilmud, lilamed. Everybody, not because you're a professional teacher, you're mechuyev to teach. Whoever you can. I don't know. Maybe my Torah. Lishmar v'lasos. So what does lishmar mean? What does lishmar mean? V'shamru b'nei Yisrael l'Shabbos. They hugged it. What did you do exactly? What's a lishmar? There's a bris of shmiras Hamitzvos. What does lishmar mean? Does anybody suggest something for me, please? Or is this a mummified audience? What does lishmar mean? Not kiyum hamitzvos, asiyas hamitzvos, but shmiras hamitzvos. Hello? You're a shomer. You're supposed to guard them. How do you guard them exactly? To make sure it doesn't fall out of the chumash. What do you do? Does anybody know? It's a bris. You guys don't even know the covenantal relationship you have with Kodesh Baruch Hu. God help me. If you're not in a kaimet, you're made for a bris. No one cares about this. I don't know how you sleep at night. You're basically betraying the base. It's like a wife saying, look, I really didn't know I was supposed to be loyal to you, so I have a few boyfriends. What can I do? I didn't learn. You know what I mean? Brother dear, marriage says there's a bris. It says no hanky-panky. And if you do, it's mayil mal b'isha. The pasuk says you're transgressing, you're treacherous out of the covenantal relationship with your husband. You better find out about it. I got news for you. You all have a bris with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. And each freaking mitzvah say and license it. Get that straight. That's one. Not just that. Each bris was written 3 times. Sinai, Oil Mayed, and Arvis Moyev. What? What are you going to do by mitzvah say? Prevent what? What does it mean? Well, let's understand what it means to say. You must think about it and make sure it happens or it doesn't happen. Equals you have to know and be wary. You have to live with a consciousness of achrayus. It's a bit more deeper than what you said. You have to live with a mindset of constant achrayus on this mitzvah. You're supposed to put on tefillin tomorrow morning. You're supposed to wake up in the morning. He said, listen, I have to put on tefillin. You have to live with an awareness and you do what it takes to make sure it happens. Okay, that's what it means. Living with an achrayus, that's what it means. Living with obligation awareness. Now, Lakir, I hope you, well, if you haven't done it until now, you maybe did it subconsciously. We all live subconsciously, we know, but that's not called the mitzvah shmira. That's called the shomer shaloi midas. You know what I mean? The shishke shmira. Shmira is chaybus. You have to do active shmira. It has to be bedas. You have to be aware that you have the responsibility. You have to make sure that you have whatever it takes to facilitate the responsibility. That's the idea of shmira. One of the makoros of the gzeres chazal is the shemartim is mishmarti, asum mishmeres le mishmarti. That's the makor of gzeres chazal. The chazal can make gzeres to be goyder, a mitzvah, to make sure you don't transgress in an avera, like muktzor, like basar, mechalev, etc. The makor of gzeres chazal is the shamrus mishmarti. That all the Rishonim agreed to. As far as the halacha of leisasser, that's a machlaikis. The Rama learns it's the Raisa, the Ramban says it's only an asmachta, and so does Rabbeinu David and Sanhedrin Pegim. If you want to know, my Rama was good. Okay, that's a why you chay b'chlal mitzvah d'Rabbanan. That's a nachashayla. Okay, is it the Kabbalah? Is it the Rabbeinu David believes it because we all agree to do it? I don't want to be it's called Cherim Atzibur, which is actually worse than a neder. It's like, that's terrible, okay? But that's it. It runs between the shadow of Cherim Atzibur, between Divrei Kabbalah, Shekach Kibalnu Misine, or it's found in a pasuk of Leisasser. 3 Shitas in Rishonim. Okay, just want you to know. I know there's a Kunster Buchan on it, but he only saw the Ramban and the Rama. He didn't see Rabbeinu David. They didn't have it this time. And even when he saw the Ramban, he didn't see all of it because he misses the point there. One day, if you're really interested, I can read it to you. Weiter. I'm doing this for purpose. That means don't look there. First learn the Gemara, first learn the Rishonim, then you don't look there because there'll be no marks if you do. Okay, weiter. Uvchein. So that's basically the halach of shmira. So what are we saying here? That the idea behind this is a pasuk shmartem. You have to make sure you have the responsibility at kol chukoisai, v'kol mishpatai, v'asisim osam. So both the chukim and the mishpatim, and you do shmira and you have to do asiyah. That's the pasuk, right? Zok the Rama v'amru chachamim litin shmira v'asiyah. There's a chiv shmira and a chiv of asiyah. L'chukim mishpatim. So what's asiyah? Everybody knows. Do it. You do what's asiyah? You do it. V'shi aseh a chukim. What does shmira mean? Zok the Rambam. You shouldn't be light about them. You should take them seriously and understand you really have a responsibility. Oh, this is a shvachem mitzvah. This is not that relevant. We can go on and talk about whatever. That all that kind of language is akir of a pasuk. You must look at chukim just like mishpatim, like somehow you totally identify with the leisignoy, with leisigzoil. I got news for you. You have to identify totally with Para Aduma and whatever else, whatever halacha there is. That's what he writes. What is shmir? Shizar behem v'lo yidme shem pchusim min hamishpatim. Why would you think that pchusim min hamishpatim? Because it's not logical, right? V'hamishpatim heim hamitzvos shetaman galui v'toivas asiyasim ba'olam hazeh yidua. That's what mishpatim are. 2 things. First of all, there's a logical, a revealed reason that you can relate to. And we also understand in this world the ta'alus of that mitzvah. He just kicked it up to another idea. Mishpatim can be a logical reason, but maybe it's a logical reason. No. We're talking a logical reason that brings it to Elis and Olam Hazeh. That's what the Rambam writes. Kigain Isser Gazel Ushvichas Damer v'Kibbut Aveim v'Achukim Hem HaMitzvah She'ein Taman Yadua. We don't know exactly the reason that that bought anywhere. Amru Chachamim Chukim Chakakti Lecha. I statuated statutes. But don't you start thinking, saying, it's not that important because it doesn't matter. Because even the Mishpatim, who says that's the reason? Obviously, your Yetzer pushes you and you cast doubt and etc. into your life. That's there's two chazals here actually. So one is talking about Yetzer Shodom Leikfai, that's the one. And the other one is also a chazal that says that Umas Ha'olam, that's why Paraduma, Umas Ha'olam are Meishiv Aleim. So both have an external cultural clash. They're going to tell you, hey, come on, this idea of Karbanis. Hey, man, come on, that's primitive, okay? And you also may have another issue. Why would God want that? Wouldn't he want me to be more like an Indian meditation religion? Why would we need animal sacrifices? One is a question at a theological, philosophical level. And one is just saying it's barbaric. It clashes with my culture. So there's A and there's B. There's two questions. That's why it says, Liba Shodom Noikfai, and also, Umas Ha'olam Meshivim Elem. Kigoyim B'sar Chazir, U'B'sar Basar V'Chala, V'Glarufo, Paradum Usar Mishtalech. This is more than enough at the moment. So what do we see here? The question stands very clear. The Rambam points out, first of all, remember, there is a reason, even if you don't understand it. You must not make light of it. You understand? Yet you do have some kind of religious value to look for a subjective reason. Now, what would the logical, first of all, source? After we find source, your question is going to be, could it be that that source will tell you a reason, or are we going to have to make one up? Well, we're not going to start making up reason before we look at the source, because maybe the source will teach us the reason. So what we do is we go to the source. The source lies in the first source in the page, which is the Mer Nevuchim, third volume, Perek Lamed Aleph. Dr. Harambam, Yesh B'nei Adam Anashim, this is so true, it's terrible. There are people, Shekashe Beinei Matan Tam LaMitzvah Min HaMitzvos. There's certain people which have a certain almost reaction to the fact that anybody's going to give some kind of a logical reasoning or a time for mitzvahs. This will be, philosophia. You'll see in certain societies where anybody even talking about Taamei mitzvahs will be perceived, you're probably going to Yeshiva University or something like that, or you went to JTS or something like that. That's going to be the we don't do that by us. Those are the type of societies where if you ask a question which they don't know how to answer, you're called a Pekarius or something like that. So there are societies which are very fundamentalist, which they have a hard time saying reason. Why do I say this? Before I go further, this exact same thing is found in Ramban. So this is not there's no argument between the rationalist and the Kabbalist. Super Kabbalist Ramban, which is also a rationalist, totally concurs with Rambam in almost every Taamei mitzvahs. I will read it to you. It's a very important thing to know, because if you want to know, coming out of Brandeis, the certain Harambam scholars, with they're not there anymore. They made machlekes between the rationalists and the Kabbalists. Sometimes you get nervous. I think they probably only read it in English. They didn't read the text inside. I'm saying this very clearly. I want to know, there's no machlekes in this. This is mainstream Judaism, both Rambam and Ramban. A, of the importance of Taamei mitzvahs, rational Taamei mitzvahs. B, that it is their way, and actually the same basic categories that the Rambam brings, the Ramban quotes and accepts. So I want you to put this on the table before we go further. This is not a Mer Nevuchim class. This is a Rambam and Ramban class. Okay, I need that very clear to understand that this is really mainstream Yiddishkeit. Maybe it's not the Heilige Derech of Hashem HaKudosh, but it's definitely the medieval Judaism. Okay, it's very good to be stuck in the medieval era. That's where Judaism is healthy. Okay, so now let's look at this carefully. So he says, Yesh b'nei Adam she'anashim shekasheh b'neihem matan Taamei mitzvah mitzvot. Now he goes further. V'yoter chaviv aleim, they actually prefer she'ein la'askil et tzivui v'azara yan klal. Don't look for intelligence in any commandment or restriction. what brings them to this? Why? What is the mental condition, literally the emotional condition, which brings people to have like a reaction to anybody that tries to bring logic to mitzvah? So he says, now he's doing some kind of a psychoanalysis as a doctor. There's obviously some mental illness or emotional unbalance. It's a very strong sentence. Whoever says this, he's not balanced. I'm going to be nice about that. There's sharper ways of how to translate this. Okay? They actually don't even know themselves their problem. They don't know why. They have a knee-jerk reaction because they're not aware of their mental situation. They can't even explain to themselves why it's there. They have an intuitive feeling. This intuitive feeling comes from a basic mental or spiritual, call it what you want, problem. So he says, Harambam will analyze what in the subconscious lies. Why do they react like a knee-jerk reaction? Ooh, Taamei, Hamitzvos. If these mitzvahs would actually have something practical for us, like for all I know, hypothetically, let's just say maybe certain dietary laws are there for health reasons. Let's just say, don't worry, he doesn't say it. It's not, well, to a certain extent. But let's say certain things, there's a logical reason behind it. He says, if you're going to say a thing like that, and that would be the reason why we were commanded, God simply is worried about my health, and therefore he told me to do X, Y, and Z. Not to eat shellfish, because, so to speak, they're very not healthy, or not to eat pork because it runs around in dirt all day. And by today's modern medicine, we know that it can be quite dangerous as far as health is concerned. It's a very, very fat meat, and it's also very, very, there's a lot of cancer contributing factors in that protein, for you want to know. But the Rambam didn't know that. He just knows the Noy Ba'ashpa, etc. It's most. Okay? So he says, if that would be true, what would be the problem with that? So you're saying it's logical? It came from someone which has logic? But if there's something which is totally can't understand, wow, I can't see any toilets from it. If it's just logical, so that doesn't make it holy, right? If I tell you the Rebbe looks and all of a sudden, you know what I mean, he sees your Gilgal, you feel, But just tell you, he's a good psychologist like A.J. Tversky. He figured you out, and basically it's a basic science. Okay, Zerstein, but he's above for Einakul. Doesn't matter. He's not a Rebbe. No, if he's talking logic, if he's a Litvak, sit this gate. If he rolls his eyes a few times over, that's Jewish. Okay, that's God. Okay, God, therefore, it's no joke. You talk to the masses. I don't want to say what I really would want to say. Yeah, you talk to certain segments of Jewish society in wherever you are, those who are not trained to logical, deductive thinking and etc. They just collect, whatever it is, they sing Kumbaya and Yismachu Malchusko and other these type of people, that they have springs in their feet and no movement between their ears. These type of people, basically, they don't want it to be logical. Hey, between you and me, because logic is very, very challenging, because they wouldn't do that. They have to have someone telling them what to do. Most people do not, let's ask a simple question. Do most people think logically? Do they act logically? Do you drink Coca-Cola? That is an illogical reality. Do you eat shawarma when you get out of this jail? Okay, Corona is that way. You guys don't get out. But in the old days when people could get out, you ate shawarma. You know what shawarma is? They put this meat with a glob full of fat on top of it in the morning. It's there all day in the street with all the fumes of the cars and the buses going over. That's it. And you're going to eat that? It's literally been, what is it? It's veal. No, it's not veal. It's sheep meat, right? It's keves. It's lamb. And you see how they put it, fill it up, and they put this big glob of fat. It's cellulose of the meat. And they put a tomato on top of it. I remember when they do it. And then what happens is it goes around this fire for how long? For 12 freaking hours in the outside there. That's what you're eating, right? And all the buses in Ashdod and all the cars, all the fumes are there. What you are devouring there is there's definitely tons of chemicals. I don't know how much meat there's really there. Okay, I never tasted stuff in my life. Never near it. So, are you crazy? It's abhorrent. It's like eating dreck. It's like eating, hot dogs. Did you ever see what that's made of? I know. Okay, my father was in the kashrus business. Everything which comes out of an animal which is not meat, the nails, etc., is ground in what you call hot dogs. Salami, that's the last thing you go near. They're a health hazard, most of them, if you'd understand. But we all guys pack with hot dogs when they have hot dogs with French fries, right, in a bun, and with the Coca-Cola. Every shlosh averos chamuris you're eating over there. This is mamish nothological. It's purely obsessive desire. True. I choose not to think of science and choose to do things. It looks good. You know how much food coloring's in that thing? Here, these people eat dried fruit on Tu B'Shvat. God! You know what? Okay, what's in there? Do you aware of that? They took out all the nutrients. What's left is nothing more than the basic dry matter. Now, in order to be edible, they injected food coloring, artificial sweeteners, okay, and a hell of a lot of water to bring it back somewhat into life. And what you are eating there has very little to do with what's called fruit. Even the sweetness is not the natural fructose, which is digestible. You're getting injected sugars. It's very not healthy. Not that I'm the paragon of health foods, okay? Believe me, you can understand yourself. You can see for yourself. Okay, that's not the question. But I know what I'm doing. As I need to bed, so I'm very much aware. Now I'm doing the battle mitzvah. Give me the hamburger. You know what I mean? But at least I know what I'm doing. You know what I mean? You laugh. The food they give you here, thank God, they bring only chicken and buckwheat, so I'm safe. It's natural thing. But you guys get stuff here, which is, I don't know, I haven't been there in ages in the dining room. But I remember they used to give them hot dogs. Oh, God. French fries, you get French fries like every day, right? The potato noodles and French fries and rice. That's all you get for supper. Okay? And it's the bavloi tipshodesh achla nama benama. You eat bread with bread. That's what you eat. That's your supper. Okay? So let's be honest. People don't live logically. How many people think in a deductive way, consciously? When you read a Conan Doyle novel, so you have a shtickle ashpoa, you think you're a little Mr. J. You want to be like Watson, so you start thinking a little bit. But afterwards, you read a Harry Potter, you forget it. Right? Let me read them emes. To what extent is logic really the way you're thinking? Honestly, I think it's definitely not predominant in your existence. It's something you know how to use, hopefully. Okay, but practically speaking, it doesn't govern your life. Not at all, in that fashion, form, or size. Ultimately, so therefore, one must understand that people are not logical. Now, what do people do? They love embracing things which are authoritative. People love to be told what to do. It's really interesting. I can't think, I don't want to think. Tell me what Rabbi Chanan says. Okay, why? The Sipsazavoy Dezora. You need someone else to tell you how to think. Tell me what Reb Shimon says. What do you say? I don't say. What do they say? I told you once that Rabbi Chavroni told us we had a bechina on Setas Yivamis, the first bechina I had in Chavroni Yeshiva. Our class was a very, very, very united class. And in every class you have what it is Beinus and Ziburis. The Ziburis Didan is Idis Dalma. You should know. Our Ziburis was the Idis of all these other places. But there was comparatively Ziburis. This, the guy didn't know he's 20 black cold before he walked into the Bechina. And Rav Moshe, we did all together in his house, and he asked questions, and he pointed questions to this one, to that one. And we had a deal. We had like 4 little whiz kids, young boys there. I was one of the babies. And we said, whenever he picks on one guy, which is a Pshazah Schlepper, so one of the kids, because we're young, so we're chatzufim, so jump up and say the answer. And therefore save your friend. That's the way it was. It was very strong, the musketeers, all for one and one for all. It was a certain unbelievable, a sense of loyalty one to the other. It's like, the Boy Scouts. So a kid says, this guy, Moshe picks on one of these guys, and we didn't have time to help. The guy says, Rebbe Chanan asked the question. You have to understand, in Chavon Yeshiva, an answer like that is like saying a davar nevola. So Moshe looks at him and says, you don't speak Yiddish. I would mimic him. It'd be great. But I would tell you what he said in Yiddish. He says, young boy. He looked at him, he stared, thought of how to say this. Goes, that's an answer. Young boy. The head is like a closet. It has finite place. If you will clutter it with other people's thoughts, there will never be place for your own. That's it. He didn't ask the question further. He went to somebody else. Das ist derech. Remember this. Jungermanschkel. The cup is wie a shaf. It's like a closet. There's finite space. Cluttered with other people's ideas, you'll never have your own. There are many people which they don't believe they can have their own, therefore they do nothing more than clutter their brains with other people's ideas. And therefore they become very neutered. And that's most of people that I know. Because they weren't trained to be independent, make your own mistakes. That's cool. But to be independent, I have to learn. So what? But I won't be able to say shtickle Torah on Thursday. Don't. Sit and learn. Write down your question. Take your time. And it's a yad yaber. 5 years later, you have thought independently. You have asked. You have built. You have fallen. You have won. You have lost. 5 years later, you're Mabed Miknoscha, and all of a sudden, you've trained yourself to be independent. When you open your mouth, then, well, there's something to hear. 5 years, the shvach. 7 years. That's when if you finish Nashim Nezika. Okay, but you finish Nashim Nezika. Yeah, otherwise, I don't mean 10 blat and 5 Masechtas. You finish Nashim, that's what it takes. Like 7 years, that's what it takes. To finish Nashim Nezika from beginning to end. Gmur Rashi Tesis Rosh Rifran. And then open your mouth beforehand. Adarabah, Vushtet, you have to say anything. Whoever said that you have to have all the answers? It was a katuv. I don't understand. You're beginning physics. You have all the. You've solved all the machlekes between Planck and Einstein. What are we doing here? What's Redmond though? You understand? What do you want? Because a little a mashtin bakir. That's what they call dogs in the Navi. You urinate on the walls. Okay, you need answers. Who don't have answers? Take your time. Develop independence slowly, and you'll get there. Yeah. It's like learning how to swim, learning how to run, learning everything. I don't know about you. You really think there's such things automatic fast? Within a year, I'm a Talmud Chacham. Yeah. I don't know what you are. You're Nishkin Talmud, Nishkin Chacham, or whatever you are. I don't know. You're an onion. You know what I mean? The Gemara writes about this. The Gemara writes about young little yeshiva boys that feel that they want to go into the arena. So he said, the Gemara writes a mashal. He says, like the little donkey, excuse the expression, a jackass. Okay? And he sees the bulls and he sees the arena. He wants supposed to be a part of a bull in the arena. But he doesn't have horns. So what does he do? He's got ears. So he puts cardboard on his ears that looks like horns. If he goes, so he goes into the arena, but then he sees the snorting bulls, so his ears droop and the cardboard falls off. He said, that's what these yeshiva kids look like. You understand? Don't say anything, learn. Who says you have to say anything? Well, you're going to tell me about what someone else says? Very nice. You know how to clip a Kilis Yankiv, or tell me over, what's it called again? Minchas Asher, or Hamitzvos, or Nachlas Moshe, or whatever little book you have with it. Thank you very much. It's so sweet of you. What do you gain? Nothing. Did you develop independence? Did you develop a skill? You collected a little bit of information. You're what's called a chamor noises svarim. That's a chamor. Shoot a gemashmoy. Okay, I want you. I'm doing this only because I care about you. I mean, what's going to happen to you? Nothing's going to happen. It's a double pasha. So one has to understand. I'm going back here, back to what. There are people like that. Most people don't want to think. Most people want to be told what to do. It is terrible to say that most of humanity wants a strong leader which tells them what to do. They're not really interested in democracy, except for America. Even a certain group in America at the moment didn't really want democracy. But Russia, Putin is the boss, man. And when they had, so to speak, democracy, it was pandemonium. You're too young to remember this. Okay, that's when the mafia took over the country and all the Yiddish became rich. The New York Yiddish, from the west side, they all went there and things were doing good. You know what I mean? That's the reality. Most of society wants a dictatorship. That's why the natural rule of humanity is melech. They don't do well with, yeah, of course, the democracy of Rome. Somebody's funny. Do you know the history of Rome? Democracy of Rome, the dictatorship of the strong person in the Senate, or of Caesar, or of Augustus, and so on and so forth. We can talk about Greece. Yeah, the democracy of Greece. There was a dictatorship there. It depends who was pulling the most things. There's always a strong person. This country loved David Ben-Gurion. Until he quit, no one wanted to let him out. You know what I mean? Or now they vote for Bibi. They need a strong leader that they feel comfortable with. They want to be told what to do. Do I agree with him? No. Do I think he's a thief? Yes. What's the difference? He tells me what to do. I don't have to think. So that's the people that the Rambam is talking about also in religion. Also in religion, people do not enjoy thinking logic because logic demands from them consistency. Logic demands from them thought. My entire Frank, the Pasuk says in Keres, Yosif Das, Yosif Machov. The more you think, the more you suffer. The bliss of ignorance is a pleasure. Gan Eden Elyon. What to do? I don't know. He'll tell the rabbi, will tell me again the Yotzev and the mitzvah. Right? That's what I don't know in the sugya. I'll look up Hamitzvos, Kilis Yankel Barrel. You know what I mean? That's basically what you're doing. And that's the people the Rambam is talking about. So they love accepting things which are illogical, because they don't want to be governed by a man. They want to be governed by something which is more than man. Well, if man is defined by logic, something which is illogical feels more godly. It's easier for them to accept it. That's what the Rambam writes. These feeble-minded thinking people. So man is actually more perfect than his creator. Why? Because man, he says and does, he is goal-oriented. And you're telling me, he just wants it. There's a goal orientation. Now, let's understand what this man is saying. I want to understand what's said here. They don't even want to know that there's a Ta'elis somewhere else. If you would tell them the Ta'elis is not good. Do me a favor, that's not the issue. They don't want God to be defined as causative. There's a logical cause and effect. It's not that they have to have dafka Ta'elis here. These people, their mental state is, they just want to be told and not say why, and it doesn't matter why. And who says there is a why? Just like we don't have a why for the creation of the world. I hope we understand that by now, because we dealt with that at length. Okay, for the infinite God is not defined by logic, is the creator of logic, and therefore naturally there's no logical reason for the creation of logic. It's called tzvas b'tzvas asuya. Ultimately, therefore, if there's no logical reason for creation of the world, who says there's logic? Is there a logical reason why you have 2 ears and 1 nose and not 2 noses and 1 ear? Is there a logical reason why your face is shaped that way and it's not square with the funny antennas coming out, like the Teletubbies, whatever they're called over there? Is there any logical reason for anything that you know? No, God decided. You decided that's what he wanted. If you read the pictures of in the Merkava of the Malachim, the Shofim by Yecheskel, that's because it's psychedelic, man. They look interesting. You know, they're like wheels with legs and animal faces. That's something cool. You know, it's like a Picasso going drunk. So now you understand. So how can we look like so this way? You have an answer? It lies in the infinite will of God, which is beyond comprehension. That's all, beyond logic. That's all. What there is, whatever it is, it's God wanted, period. Do I think about logic? Do I think there's a certain telos? I don't even think in those terms. I don't even ask the question. It doesn't bother me. I accept it as the axiomatic reality and goodbye, Charlie. Now they say the same thing. I don't need to have any telos anywhere. I just need it. That's the will of God, and that's enough for me. Now, in truth, is that terrible? I mean, what's the difference? Why is the Rambam so like hacking at them? What's the difference in that? And there's no logical reason for the building, for the creation of the world. And you're willing to accept all of the symmetric science for no logical reason and for no telos. Does God need this world? No. He doesn't need anything, right? He's infinite. Therefore, he lacks naught. He doesn't need anything. He doesn't have anything driving him. The infinite God doesn't even have a teva. It is the infinite God which chose to make a environment infinity into a finite form called Ratzain, Teva, Seichel, what we call the spheres, which I taught in the Tanya class. And there is a certain Teva and Teva, Teva, all these beautiful things are true. But that's only if God had to form that. Infinity doesn't even have that. Any definition, any property cannot be defined within infinity. Infinity, by definition, doesn't have properties. So even the answer, the famous answer of the Ramchal, why did God create the world? Because he's a toiv, a muchlat, v'teva, toiv lahetiv. That doesn't answer anything. It's for the feeble-minded to think that that's an answer. But why did he make that teva? No, do you really think he's coerced? That the infinite God is lacking, he has a certain thing governing him, he has a psychological hang-up, he has a teva called toiv, which is driving him and therefore pushes him to do things? Are you not feeling? Well, that's kfira. Do you understand to say that the infinite God has a teva is kfira? Is anybody aware of that? It's Pashut Kfira. And people who teach this without explaining the context of that Ramchal, they're teaching you Kfira. God doesn't have a teva. The Ein Sof doesn't have a teva. The Ein Sof, which is mistamsim in the anhaga, the spheres, the elyonis, which means he decided to create an interactive persona. Chesed, Gvur, Tiferes, Netzach, Chacham, Bina, V'das. Chesed, Gvur, Tiferes, Netzach, Chod, Yesod, Malchus. There's a teva of one of the spheres. There's a teva in the spheres of Lahetiv. It's called Chesed B'li Gvul. Look all it is. Okay, they don't even tell you the truth. There's also another meter which is the opposite, a teva of totally not giving, called Gvur B'li Gvul. So people don't learn Ramchal b'shoyrish, don't understand what he's saying. You have to understand, as much as the teva called Chesed, there's a teva called Gvur, which is the anti-Chesed. So hello, now go explain that. So that Ramchal, which everyone quotes very acutely, is really, it's a whole medrash which has to be explained. I'm saying it right now because many people quote it to me. But naniach, one day you'll understand what he means. Understand he's only talking la'achar ha'atzilus, once God created with this idea of an interactive persona, which he expresses his infinity in through finite kalim of chachma, bina, v'das, chesed, gevur, tiferes, netzach, chod, yesod, and malchus. There's tvoim. Granted, there's a certain anag of how to act, etc. Granted, that doesn't answer why he did it. Why did he do that? Why would he do anything? And there's no reason. There can't be reason. There's no logical reason. There's no reason. Because every reason is a function of chachma. What's the reason for creation of chachma? It's an oxymoron. What's the reasoning for creating reason? If there's no reason, there's no reasoning. So to ask a siba for the world is impossible. Never ask it. Especially he doesn't understand his language. If you know language, you know that's not a question. So why do I feel that I have to say that God also gives the reasons for mitzvahs. Maybe mitzvahs are there because the infinity expressed itself in that will. Just they express itself in creation, which is totally illogical. Maybe that's also true. The only reason I would say that it has place, I'm trying, on one hand, I'm blowing him away, but I'm going to help him. His challenge is nothing. I don't think that it has to be illogical. If he hears it, analyze these people, why do they have an emotional reaction? Because they have hang-ups. He's right. But okay, I don't have an emotional reaction. And I don't mind if there's a reason. But I think it's futile to look for a reason because who says there is one? It could be have one, but who says there is one? Why make something up? Who says there's reason? Maybe there's no reason. Does it have to have reason? That's the question. Does a mitzvah have to have reason? Are you saying that if God did something without reason, is that demeaning for God, saying God works without reason? Well, we know he works without reason. He created reason, so there are wills of his which precede reason. The only thing you will say in that is true. I'm trying to rephrase this in a way that philosophically, I'm going to make this Rambam work. Okay, it means very simple. Granted, God does not have to express himself for reason. But the only thing we know about him, we know of God, the only thing we know about him in the natural state before revelation is through creation and science. The infinite has expressed itself in creation. There is nothing more logical than the causative reality of science. It's like frightening. The more we learn that we see A leads to B, leads to C, leads to look at your DNA and go bananas, okay? You understand? We look at the gilui of a Kadosh Baruch Hu of creation, the primary gilui, creation, the Yesh Mi'ayin. What do we see? He created out of naught a logical sequence. And that's his primary revelation. Prior to Sinai, that's it. As the Rambam writes, how we know God, that's the primary knowledge of God, through my telescope and through my microscope. It's only later at Har Sinai that he basically did so much more. He revealed a metaphysical and a reality in which we had a prophetic vision, which we shared with Moshe Rabbeinu to a certain extent. And we had a vivid experience of an encounter with a metaphysical reality called God. That's the God of religion, so to speak. But prior to God of religion, what we have is God of creation, right? God of creation is the primary. The Rambam writes, in order to encounter God of religion, you must first find him in God of creation. How do you do that? Still learning Torah. You want to know God? Well, go into his cultural reality and figure out who he is. How do I know his feelings about things? What's his agenda? You have to date him. How do you date him? What's a date? A date is learning who the person is and figuring out whether you're compatible, whether there's a companionship, whether there's respect, right? That's dating, CRC. Okay, so the CRC of companionship, respect, and compatibility are basically what you're doing when you're learning Torah. You're figuring out what his agenda is, how he thinks, what are his values, what does he demand? Can I live with you? You better. It's a shotgun marriage. But at the end of the day, that's what you're supposed to do. That's the Ma'aseh Limud of Torah. But that's the second stage. First stage normally is from your first meet God of creation. If you would have had a decent upbringing and your parents would have bought you, instead of Kahati Mishnayos for Bar Mitzvah, they would have bought you telescopes and microscopes. You would have been so curious about science and the unbelievable logical chachma of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You would be enamored and you'd develop a thirst to know more about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And they would tell you, well, you know where it is? It's in the Gemara. You'd be sitting in this 18 hours a day. Mistaba, you didn't collect enough leaves and rocks and fireflies, etc. If you would have done a little more, maybe it would have been better. As I stated in Harambam, I don't know about you guys. That's my mind. The second parak of Yisod Yatar. That's a cloud God. So the pshat is like this. You have to understand what no one is saying that mitzvah's Torah has to be logical. But since the God of revelation is purely logical, God of creation is purely logical. So the infinite has expressed it totally in a logical reality. Now, is there any logical reason to say that God expressed primarily himself in logic in order to afterwards express himself in revelation with no logic? That is an illogical assumption. Everything in the world is logical. The laws of science, not the laws of man. What man does is there's nothing logical. But the world of science, the God of creation, is super logical. Everything is causative. The more we learn, the more we see the unbelievable causative reality of a proportionate connection relationship between every cause and its effect. It's more than fantastic. The Rama writes that is the way you know God, and that drives you into a theological quest. Are we supposed to say that you're so enamored with the wisdom and the logic, therefore you are driven into an illogical theology? That'd be a letdown, to say the least. That's not logical. Is it possible? It's possible. Is it mistaver? No. In other words, God of infinity is not logical, not governed by logic. But God, once he's revealed in creation, is a God. The only thing we know about that God is logic. Then we look into history. So although history looks chaotic, but if you take yourself, you go with 1,000-year pieces backwards, you see it's actually an unbelievable logical sequence. If you look at the broad picture, you see A led to B, led to C, led to D, and all of a sudden, bingo, I have a computer. So many different things happen due to crises. Now, your question is, why do we need the crises? As I figure God, so in order to people, you notice in history, the greatest changes in morals and in social structures and the destruction of immoral social structures, for example, the up and down staircase of the Victorian period in England, almost like a caste system. You're the nobility versus the coal miners of England. That was destroyed with the trauma of World War I. The world became much more equal with the slaughter of World War I. The fact that women can vote, etc. You know, World War I was a major trauma to man, and because under trauma, man reassesses his values, and many things changed. This is an honest truth. I mean, what do you think? I don't know if you read about the League of Nations, which is a dream after World War I. And after World War II, they opened the UN, which was effective for at least a nice 20 years. After it's just Korean tourists go there, but it's meaningless now. But it did good things for a good 20 years. When the world still lived under the impression of the trauma, so this idea of let's protect ourselves worked. As soon as slowly but surely we walked away from the trauma, so everything fell apart. It's once again, it's the human condition is an interesting human condition in which we reassess our values through trauma. I once taught it's a parak in Yeshayahu, which describes this parak base. It says, how will we finally do tshuva? There'll be a terrible traumatic experience, and people will be scared, and the whole value system will fall apart. That's what you call the you say in Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. It's a pashta parak. At that stage, we will walk away from our avodah zoros and from our gashmias and become thinking people. It's a parak in Navi. That's what's going to end. The human condition started that way and it's continuing that way, and it's going to end that way. God of history is actually very logical. Why Dafka this type? I can't talk about the pratim. I don't know. In patterns, because history is taught in patterns, right? I mean, has anybody read or studied or taken any courses in history? No one's done. No. Well, history is analyzed in patterns, and you can really see patterns. Yeah, you need 1,000-year, retrospective. You have to be able to see with rachas, but you can see patterns. There is logic in history. I can't talk about the pratim because I don't have God's, a scale of how to see things. But I can see patterns, I can see things that were developed because of, I can see so many different things. So all this is logical. So all of a sudden to say that is in theology, he walked away from all that. Also, he lost his notes, and all of a sudden he just like, I want, is something which doesn't make sense. So that's what I would like to say. So he's not saying that it's impossible that God sees it. You people which are disturbed by the fact that you have an emotional reaction to God being logical, this is a mental illness. You feel that God can't be logical. That is pathetic. But we are allowed to, but God doesn't have to be logical. That I will agree. God can be more than logic, for he created logic. But if that's the case, we should stop the conversation. The answer is no. Since God of creation has expressed himself in an unbelievable sequential logical form called science, thus and also history, if one has any perception of history, you come to a conclusion that it's going to be very illogical to say that the great ideas of science and human behavior, there's a logical reality. All of a sudden, when it comes to theology, garnished. When the Rambam himself says that what leads me to the question of theology is the beauty and the symmetry of the logic of science. Now, that won't work well if all of a sudden you engage in totally illogical phenomena. So that's what the Rambam is being saying. If I want to put this on the table, he's talking about an emotional reaction to that you must psychologically make sure God's illogical. That's still. But I repeat, one has to remember this. At the end of the day, hypothetically, the reason behind mitzvahs, there is a logic, could be a logic to it, but that doesn't mean it is the reason. There's a logic in science that we have no logic of why our faces are oval, or why we have 2 ears and one nose. Once you have the form, he'll give you logic of what's behind it. But there are a lot of pratim there which we do not know. And there's no reason which caused it except for the will of God. Even within revelation of science, it's tons of logic. There's no way, unless you're going to believe in a certain form of evolution, which therefore the head had to somehow, because of gravity, whatever it be, and grow, become elongated versus I don't know what, the other way around. That's not going to happen because at the moment we do believe in intelligent design, and therefore even the process of evolution is going to be through an intelligent design. So it must lie in the intelligence of the infinite, for goodness sakes. So man is not privy to everything, but in the broad picture of science, he's privy to a God of logic. In light of this, you must understand, taking into account the God that we know through science, so it's Adrabah, we must say that there is logic which is conceivable in everything. Why does he say conceivable? Maybe there's a logic beyond your scope. Correct. Well, if you don't know your physics, so you won't understand the logic between certain physical realities. What are you going to do? So maybe it's beyond your scope, which is fair. So now he has to prove that there is at least every mitzvah has a logic within the scope of man. Because you could look and say, yeah, maybe this Taamei mitzvah, if God understands it, I don't. Well, I told you there's a lot of things I don't understand. They just discovered DNA 30 years ago. 50 years ago. Yeah, that's true. Okay, examine Michael. So maybe we'll discover one day. At the moment, it's been centuries and we don't know. What's the problem? Why is he so sure of himself? He's really reflecting what he's going to bring a few lines later. Look what it says. Now he's a very strong sense. The kol matara of the mitzvahs does it mean kol matara or kol mitara niglet? He writes here, kol matara. Who ta'alteinu k'mo shebi'anu. He's taking the psukim kipshutam. What does the pasuk say for the shaila of the chacham? Where is it in Parshas Re'eh? Where it says there, ma'edus v'achukim shetziv Hashem lekenu eschem, which means to say, if anybody read the Chumash Be'iyun, that means what is the reason that we do mitzvahs? He's not asking what are the mitzvahs, because the answer doesn't give him in Shas and Place give him there. The answer gives reasons why we're doing mitzvahs. So obviously, means doesn't mean what are they, but what is the reason we are bound by them? If you read the answer in the Chumash, what does it say? Because we met God in Egypt, we realize that He is everything, and therefore it is right for us to accept Him as God, our Lord. And He's commanded these commands. First of all, because He's king and He's supreme. By the way, and He commanded these mitzvahs not just because He's king and supreme. He did this the and then it says that means it's the right thing to do to follow Him. So what's the right thing to do? To follow Him and understand this the Taiv Lanu. And what's that answer on? And Edus, Chukim, and Mishpatim. Some unfortunate passage in Chumash is the Taiv Lanu. That's the Makkah of the Rambam. It's about the Taiv Lanu. That means that to Ellis in this world. Is that only this world? No, never said that. But remember, we're asking a young child, why would I do this? We're not talking. So the answer is we're doing this because we met God and we trust Him. And He told us this is good for us. I trust Him. I met the doctor. He gave me a diet and said, this is the way you live. You'll do well. So what is the first pasuk? That the Taamei Hamitzvos are there. If you read the Chumash inside, please. Because I know when you take that pasuk, I go to Pesach, you think it means what are the halachas of Pesach. Anybody learning the Chumash knows that pasuk's not even talking about Pesach. Sometime in the middle of Tammuz, I don't know when. That's the pasuk, nothing to do with Pesach. It says, He commanded you, right? You're Dor Boy Oretz. You got the commandment. You were at Sinai. I wasn't. You guys left Egypt. I was born here. Lachar Zman. Okay? Why are we religious? What binds us to these commandments? He doesn't know. He didn't. So the answer is very simple. It's simply because we met God in Egypt, and we realized what that is, and we discussed at length the last two shiurim and what that means when we met God in Egypt. And we know all the things that the Ramban discusses in Seif Parshas Boy, that we met. So, and he told us this is the Taiv Lanu. We could have said, and he said that's the way it is. Doesn't say that in the Chumash. It doesn't mean that's not also true. It means that, but for the young boy, which is obvious, first you have to understand there's a time which is emes. Now we're not conning him because he's a young boy. He needs a little piece of candy, so I know it's good for you. This Chumash. This is Torah Hashem. It means it's an emes. Is that the only reason? No one said that. That's the reason you're giving to the young boy. He's a young boy. He's asking a theological question. It's not the Talmud Chacham that you have to tell him which is the last Mishnah of Psachim. So basically, you tell him all Masechtas Psachim from Oral Arbasa is the end of our Psachim. That's not what it means. The Rosh Mishan says, therefore, it's a mitzvah to learn Hilchas Pesach and Lil Pesach. It's a kiyum din of Sipit Tzes Mitzrayim. Learn Masechtas Psachim. That's what he says. Okay, it's interesting. That's the only Hilchas Pesach. So it won't include a lot of things there which are not. Okay, Mukm Shinogu is not part of it. You know what I mean? I'm sorry to say, you know what I mean? But the Kiddush Avdallah are not part of it. The sugyas of Pesach, of Chametz and Matzah and Pesach and Korban Pesach. It's a lot of it. Anyway, at the end of the day, that's the question. The Torah Kedosha tells us that we're supposed to tell them the Taiv Lanu. That's where the Rambam's coming from. Otherwise, there's a Madna Rambam. It's not the Rambam. It's a Davar Pashat that the Torah is this Taiv Lanu. That's your mucker. Otherwise, this would be an atrocious Rambam. So that means the only Matorah? Well, that's the Matorah that we are taught that that's why we should do to tell our children. So the Rambam writes, "V'chala Matorah yital teinu k'moshe bi'arna." Mimashe ne'amar l'toiv lanu kol hayom nachisenu ki yom hazeh. That's the pasuk. V'amar asher yishmu'u kol chukim ha'elev amru. Now what's this? This is the beginning of Nitzavim. It's an unbelievable pasuk. Pasuk says that you're going to go into the land of Israel, it's like Canaan at the time, and the people are going to hear of you and hear of your laws, they're going to say what? Let's see what they're going to say. They're going to hear all the chukim. It doesn't say mishpatim. Chukim, which definitely means also the mishpatim, but the chukim includes the idea of mitzvahs with no reason at all, right? It's called a chukim eile. The amru, and they will say, Rak am chacham v'navona goy gadol. This is a very intelligent nation. Why? What does the pasuk say afterwards? Asher loy chukim umishpatim tzadikim. They are just and sensible. Stakati alonu, the right thing to do. Now, who is making this statement? Are they all a bunch of Yale College and PhDs in comparative religion living there at the time when the Jews coming to Eretz Yisrael? Who are they? Who are the goyim at the period? The local chivi herder, Girgashi farmer. It's the guy that smokes corn cob, you understand, and plays bowling and drinks beer and gets drunk on Super Bowl Sunday. Okay, that's what we're talking. We're not talking about a theologian. We're not talking about a doctor of religion. We're not talking about Talmud Chacham. The God, the hilarious stuff. The goyim. Which goyim? The Girgashi, Chivi, Amari, etc. That's what we're talking about, right? And what's he saying here? That the horse sense of the local farmer will chap that there is logic in Ta'elis, Paul, the Chukim, and the Mishpatim. In other words, he won't say a mishpat means something which has, I want to explain something to you, which is very important. In Svaris, when you'll learn one day, I taught this once in my classroom. There are different types of Svaris, but I will take two categories which are very important. There are Svaris which are independent, and they stand as sources of halacha. Lama likra Svari, right? Found quite a few places. Svara, Gemara takes for granted, does not need a pasuk, and it rules dominant without a pasuk. There's a hanacha here. That svara, if it's a svara, she'ena le'ashuva, that's an emes, and an emes is mechayiv, without a pasuk. A goysi yisod, what do you mean lamali kra? This gives a theological basis. There's nothing as strong as theological basis than svara. Not a svara of a boich svara, a svara which is, an independent svara, which is, there's no way you can argue with this. You know what I mean? Yeah, there are svaras like that. They're called independent svaras, which have independent existence. Most of the svaras or most of the svaras around, are basically what we call apologetic svaras, explanatory svaras. You wouldn't make the halacha with that svara, because there's other possibilities too. Once there is a pasuk which tells me this is the ruling, so we explain the Torah is teaching me this is the logic behind the ruling. But first you needed a source of a ruling, and only afterwards will you say, this is what the Torah is teaching me, that this svara is the dominant one that you should use. It doesn't mean that svara independently you would accept. It's one of the possibilities. Possibility A, possibility B, possibilities ain't chayke. Okay? So the Torah says, this possibility I want you to work with. So you have independent svaras, and you have what you call explanatory, apologetic svaras. If you understand the difference, it's like Yom and Valayla. Those are two totally different things. One has to be very, very, very clear. And there can be major enough communities in Havanas like Gemara and Rishonim once you have that rule in front of you, believe me. Okay, that's a davar pashut. So now understand that, what does the chivi feel? When I say a chayk, what does a chayk mean? A chayk means to say there's a logic which we see from the halacha. A mishpat is, no, the logic is the reason for the halacha. A chayk has a logic to it, otherwise you couldn't extrapolate halachas and chukim. You're learning ilchas chametz from other things, etc. You're going to be in absence there is Shabbos. I thought it's illogical. Enkas the davar. There's the seichel hatayra there. There is a logic. And lamai, the logic comes once the chuk is there. Now we look very logically at the kol hatayra kula. We don't say there's no being afu chukim. Are you out of your freaking? Anyone learns chumash with Gemara wouldn't dream of saying that. So what do you mean doesn't have logic? I understand there's nothing part of Torah which doesn't have logic. The Torah says, yeah, but that's explanatory logic. The logic gufa is the chiddush Torah, either the b'chlal that this is a logic, or that you chose this logic over any other possibility. But there is logic. Mishpatim means to say, If no one would tell it to me, I would see this as logical. I need society to function a certain way. Therefore, I have to rule society with certain laws. And therefore, Gezla, we learn from the Namala, because just as the Namala had, the Namala, you would learn morals. I would ask your Gezla simply, if I want self-interest, I want a communal covenant for us to exist as human people within a community. Therefore, we have to have restrictions and rules. If not, we won't be able to function together. It's very simple. Those laws are self-logically made in order to serve a purpose of civil order, in order for the community to work in unison, in order for the pratim of the community to thrive. It's all called self-interest. Don't steal from me, I won't steal from you. Together, each one will enjoy the fruits of his toils. That's what it is. Therefore, we will work. And therefore, we will contribute to each other. We will work as a community. It's a self-serving insurance. Don't kill me. I won't kill you. And Baruch Hashem, no, that's all it is. It's a horse has an itch in its back and goes to the next. He can't scratch his back. What does he do? He goes to the next horse, scratches the other horse's back. That horse idiot thinks this is a nice horse. He's scratching his back. He doesn't chop. No, he's scratching his own back on your back. He's using you. I can't get to my back. I'll scratch your back. My back will be scratched. It is mutual using of each other, which is basically what community identity is. It's mutual using of each other, and that's the idea behind these laws, which are totally to facilitate group identity in order for have self-interest, which it's not me, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Bar Chova, but what do you need the French guy for? This is Aleph base, okay? So if you understand, that's a davar pasha. So that's why he said there are two types of logic. Now the guy, the chivi farmer, can chop that. Like he wouldn't have created he wouldn't create it carbon oil. But you know what? I understand it. That's what he said. They're called mishpatim chukim mishpatim tzadikim. Now, what is that pasuk telling you? So the Harambam. Harei bi'er ki afilu hachukim kulam morim etzel kol ha'amim she'ein b'chacham b'tfuna. It's a first pasuk. Not only it's the Teva Seinu, that's one, it's actually a logic which the local chivi farmer can comprehend. This is the mucker, that's the fi koichai. Because the Gemara, the pasuk is willing to say, listen, guys, the chivi farmer can relate to this. Why is the pasuk telling that to you? Trying to tell you you understand, you wherever you are can also perceive this. What information, what theological values there in the Torah tell me the chivi farmer will respect our laws because you can see logic in it? What's he teaching you? You don't have to be a goy sheikhvais l'shor sitting there elyonim. Wherever you are, you'll be able to understand. You're like Gora than the chivi farmer. I hope none of you. You probably had a better theological education than the local chivi farmer. I don't think each one there had a PhD from Yale. They have a very good divinity school. So that's why I'm using that dafka as opposed to others. Okay, so you understand. So no, it is. It happens to be a very formative school. So you understand. So basically, the farmer can chop. It's 10 kavuchemish. I'm telling you that if the idiot can chop, then I'm telling you, but at least that you should be able to chop. That's the mucker of the fi koichoi. Now, does the chivi farmer know the emes? This is why God commanded it. You give me a break. He doesn't know what the word God means. He's a farmer. He's a yokel. He milks cows. He goes with his big boots in the zevel. You know what I mean? He goes in the chicken coop. Stinkdot. And what he doesn't know anything. And the Torah ascribes importance that we should be able to at least do that. Equal, the Torah is telling you there is importance in acknowledging what else there is for people, for us as a collective, for us as a yachid. As I point out, the Torah of the collective is the Torah of the yachid. It's the Taivlanu. The chivi farmer chapsat chukim are the Taivlanu. Equals that you at the lowest level should be able to discover what the chivi farmer would discover. This is very much parallel to the Lashon Harambam, the beginning of Mer Nevuchim, where the Rambam explains what does it mean, Dibur Torah Kalashim Bnei Adam. So he says like this. He says, look, the Chumash doesn't make sense. The Chumash, if you read Chumash without Targum Unclus, you'd actually think God is a hand and has a belly and has a throat and has a heart and and he has a stomach. He has a Ben Yakli Ephraim. He has stomach aches. He has emotional upheavals. He has a charin af Hashem. Must have a big nose. I don't know. All these different things. You think he's a snorting dragon or something like that. And you all know that if you believe in that, you're not exactly very religious, because then you're believing in a God of form, which is the antithesis of the God of infinity. You got a problem, to say the least. The Rambam calls you an apikoros. Okay? I think you say yigdal, don't you? In the goof or no whatever it is, no goof, no nothing. Okay, so why did Torah write in the fashion of goof? Why did Torah write Vayered Hashem al Har Sinai? What, he's spatial, had to come up and down? Where's God? In the heavens? What does that mean exactly? He takes space up there, he's not here? He has to come down here? Does he try business? Does he wear a mask for Corona? When Vayered Hashem? When God, what are all those words? All these words talk about corporeal God. So why would the Chumash misrepresent itself when the Chumash actually we know from Kabbalah Misinai that's not true? Why is the guy talking that language? That's the Shaila from the Rambam, in the very beginning of Mer Nevuchim. And this is the muck of the Dibur Torah B'Loshim Bnei Adam. What does it mean? So he said it's very simple. God wanted to introduce monotheism to the world and its values. Now you cannot talk to people which are not intelligent, which are the local chivi farmer, without you using their language. They have nothing more than corporeal language about God, face, nose, etc. I will talk to you in your language, introducing a monotheistic God and his values, and then when you grow up, you will finally understand. For example, I'm sure that you were in kindergarten, you were said, where's God? Bashamayim, right? Where's the Kisei HaKavod? Ask my grandchildren, Bashamayim. אז מה יש לו כיסא? בטח יש לו כיסא. איפה זה? בשמיים. ושאני במטוס אתה קרוב לשמיים. Don't laugh. It's true. You're all that way. You don't think that way? Where's God? You look up to heaven. When you say Kaddish, 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 you jump up 3 times. Why? You're trying to go up to God, right? You're also in kindergarten. You're going up. Where are you going exactly? But he's there more than here. What does it mean? There's no Shechina lamata miyutfachim. Poor midgets, they can't daven. They should sit on a chair because you want to talk to the Shechina. Okay, was meint das? Was meint das? Do you really think you know what you're talking about? You don't. So you have to figure it means a certain lashon in the Goddess Chazal. They have their lashon. Like, did anybody take a Goddess Chazal like literally? I mean, if you learn the Gra, you learn the Moral, you learn the Ramchal, you learn. They think you're retarded if you take the lashon of Chazal literally. Literally, B'stam Meshuggah. Do you ever remember Basra? 5th Perik, Rav Berchana. You have these Amiroim. Oh, you have this example. There's a Re'aim. Do you ever hear about the Re'aim? Okay, when it's born, it's high as Har Tavor. That's a Baimer Derav in Basra. Did you ever go to Tabor Mountain? You know where it is? It's near Afula. Go look at it. If you find an animal of that size, I'll eat my hat. And there's no fossils to tell us about such an animal. We got fossils of everything. So what is that? It's a metaphor for X. I don't know what it is. It doesn't matter. You have to understand the language and context of their culture and what Mishalim they use. They decide to talk cryptically because the Rambam writes why. Because they don't want every idiot to understand. They only want the totally in culture to understand. And that's why I said to my Talmidim, a letter of the Chaznisha about our goddess, you should read it again in the WhatsApp. That's what the Chaznisha is saying. Do me a favor, before you know them all, keep your mouth shut. Because you have to chap their lashonis and what makes them in the cultural context. But what I will tell you that the Prussian eagle spread its wings over Russia, over Europe. There's an eagle from Prussia, which has a wingspan of all of Europe. Okay, you'd have to be an illiterate nincompoop. No, what are we talking about? Well, everybody knows that the Prussia has the standard of Prussia. Its flag is an eagle, the black eagle of Prussia. God Almighty! It means that the Prussian eagle equals the flag of Prussia, which its minister was at the time Otto von Bismarck, and he spread his wings over all of Europe. That's what it means. But you'd have to understand the culture and the context of the language to understand what the idea is. So trying to explain the Goddess Chazal without knowing culture, context, and language, you're playing a guessing game. You're simply playing a guessing game. It's not shaykh to you. That's why the Chazon Ish says, before you know it all, you shouldn't know it. You don't know anything. First, you have to know the language and the culture and the context. Then you can talk business. Okay, that's why you need people that know Kol HaTorah Kula, like the Gra, etc. They say this is, well, they know the culture and the context. They say this is what it means. Okay, I'm going to accept him. Standing on the shoulders of like a Mickey Mouse on the shoulders of Hulk. He sees it. I trust him. Him I know, and I trust him. That's all I'm doing. It's pure trusting a scholar that I learned this, I did it, I know it, and this is my Maskana. I have no clue. So language is all a function of culture and context. If God wants to introduce monotheism to a world, he's going to have to talk with them within a culture and within the culture and context of them. He's not going to talk about some ruchnius up there. They wouldn't know what he's talking about. If he wants them to buy this and talk into this, he must talk a language which the local primitive farmer understands. And he doesn't want the Torah just to be for the Jews. We know that. Read Ramban, the Parshas Azinu. It's supposed to be revelation of monotheism to the world, which is facilitated through the Jews. Let's say first Ramban and Parshas Azinu. Our job is to be the locomotive to bring the messages of Torah Kula to the cloud, to the world. So it's a book for the world, my friends. That's why the Torah writes in the language of the local Girgashi farmer. That's the Torah Koloshim De Adam. That is when you look at the language in the Chumash, you're looking at the language which the Girgashi farmer can understand. The Chivi herder, you understand? That's what we're talking. That's Rambam Mefushim in the Nevuchim. It's a very big aside which has to be understood. That's the why. The why is for that. He writes it in a way that at least they will understand it at their level. That the entrance walking into Judaism, monotheism, is at least that level. So what are we saying here? So the Rambam, מדוע יאמר הסופרו עושה שהוא חכם ונבון ורם מעלה ויהיה זה מופלא בעמים, אלא הדבר כפי שאמרנו בלי ספק, והוא שכל מצווה מאלה 613 מצוות היא או למתן השקפה נכונה, to facilitate the development of a correct perception of reality and view and faith, או לסילוק השקפה רע, or to take away Ashkafa Ra, which was entrenched at the time in the paganistic world that the Jews were in at that time. Because remember, the book is to reintroduce monotheism to humanity. So the Torah has to deal with the issues at the time. The issues at the time were what? Were to recreate the values of God into man and take away the values of Avodah Zarah, whatever is from man, which was entrenched in. That's number one. That's the Lashon of the Mikra, Lashon B'nai Adam, as the Rambam says, at that time. Okay, so or in order to create justice, which means civil order, or to take away injustices. Yeah, all Shomrim, Mazikim, etc. Or sometimes to teach you moral, ethical behavior. Or to forewarn you and take you away from immoral behavior. If you can categorize all of Torah Kula, there are three categories for mitzvos or averos. It's either hashkafos, to put good ones in and take out the bad ones, midos, or maisim. Minhalim hamdinim equals civil order. This is enough at the moment. So what we've learned here when we look at what is he going? So now I know the source of the roy. How do I know the roy? Because if the Torah taught me that the chivi can understand it, he's telling you. Why is he telling them? Because he expects you to also do that. Now, why? What's the value behind it? Let's try to understand. What is the value behind the fact that the chivi relates and says, "Am chacham v'nova." What is God doing? What is he telling the Jews? You know, I gave you good religion. The goyim respect it. What is God telling you? What does he want? Read the Chumash. Well, if you look at the context, it's saying, listen, guys, this is really the type lechem to the extent that a chivi understands it. So find your own, you're probably more developed than the chivi, find your own way to feel that it's good for you, equals create an emotional connection through your own subjective logic to facilitate your religious behavior and growth. It's very simple. You also are coming. Now, the Rambam is very interesting because if the reasons are to be stuck into the world of paganism, which existed all the way back then, why would be royal l'chol adon fi daitoi in the era of the Rambam or today in 2020? So what are you going to say? What does Rambam mean? Here he's talking about, yes, I know there's a reason, but it's dated. If I'm to look for the reason the Chivi bought, many of the reasons the Chivi bought are entrenched in the fact that the challenge there was paganism. That's not the challenge at the moment. That's not the challenge at the moment. So then what am I supposed to be doing with this? And if you look carefully in the Rambam, when we will study some of his Taamei Hamitzvos, he actually deals with the issues of the Bible trying to uproot paganism and entrench monotheism. But that's not, maybe that was, is that the issue of people today? Do you have an issue with monotheism and paganism? That's why you have to know exactly what Basar V'Chalb is for? So why is the Rambam talking to me and telling me, Roy, you need to do it? You got to. Does he mean to say that you will make new reasons which have to do with the challenges of your life? Well, why didn't the Rambam do that with his life? Why did he constantly tell me historical reasons when we will learn it, which are totally enrooted in the period of when the Torah was given? In the big challenge, you ever read, look, what is the theme found in all of Sefer Dvarim? All of Sefer Dvarim. That's all of Dvarim. All of Sefer Dvarim, like every small speech, don't worship Avodah Zarah, don't worship, it's gefährlich. It's unbelievable. That was the major challenge. Anybody who sees Sefer Dvarim sees it like 5 times in every parsha. Okay. Is that your issue today? No. Now, does it mean you should now look for Taamei Hamitzvos today with a totally different reason? I would have thought so, but Rambam didn't, because Rambam in his period of time, what is it, the 1200, went back to the way then before BCE and told me reasons which were appropriate, stacking for the Chivi farmer and the Gigashi herder. If you read, for example, you know what, they don't be, you can't put dvash in karbanos because karbanos of Avodah Zarah were always super sweet. Very nice. Understand? Or Basar V'Chalb was a Michael Avodah Zarah. Today's Avodah Zarah are not into that. What are we doing here? You understand? So what's tutzach da? What does Rambam mean? Rambam means no, you must look in the historical data and therefore say, and somehow say, well, then why that be relevant today? Aren't you undermining it? You're not facilitating. So you're undermining it. If the whole idea of the Chumash was to facilitate behavior by putting it back in something which is 3,000-4,000 years old, a reason which is obsolete today, you're not facilitating anything. So why would the Rambam do this? Man, 800 years ago, and what's he doing? He's telling me to think about things which are thousands of years ago. How did it facilitate religion in his period of time? I'm asking this as a question. I need an answer. This is not a serious question. Because on one hand, I understand this makkah. The royal Adam is this perik Lamed Aleph. Why? Because the Chivi Amari priest they say Am Chakam Chacham V'Navon Agala Gadol Hazeh. The type Lanu Kol Hayamim. So obviously the type Lanu, the Rambam explains the type Lanu and Am Chacham V'Navon according to the reasons which are pertinent for the dead generation which was left Egypt was really entrenched in Avodah Zarah. And yet this is called Roy L'Kol Adam Rambam Hilchos Me'ila is talking about you and me. And the reasons he's given are reasons that today, even during his time, people, those Avodah Zarahs were not happening. That was not Christianity or Islam where the Rambam was. They were not dealing with the Akkadian paganist deities, which had all these different customs. So why did that, what's the value of that now? I would have understood the value of it would have been at the time for the reasons that were relevant at the time. How do you translate Al-Koch Shtei in Rambam? That you have to be able to translate that value system. That's the reason which is dated, but that presents a value which you can now translate to your world today. That's what it's saying. So that is the reason for that is dated, but and what is the reason today? Well, I never said that's the reason why God created it. I only said what was the reason which would facilitate my religious behavior. But the reason is because like the Chivi farmer, he's not a theologian. Why God created the Rambam says not bother with that. I need that what he gave at the time should have the Torah. It has a Torah, it has a Toelis. Now, but l'chayra, that's obsolete for a certain amount of mitzvahs. The answer is obviously it means saying, no, why am I not being makam basav v'chov? Because that's what God wanted. We'll go back to the old illogical reason. Yes, but Abraham says I'm supposed to be facilitate my religion and get close to it through the reason of the Girgashi farmer. How? And the answer is you must now, what you have to do is distill those reasons conceptually and therefore take those reasons in a way which will facilitate your own private religious development. That's a hard job because the Rambam didn't write that part for you. The Rambam only explained the reasoning of the Girgashi farmer. He didn't even explain how that helps people in his era in Moorish Spain or in Egypt. He doesn't discuss that. It's interesting because at his point in time it was mostly Islam and Christianity. Doesn't mention, that the reasoning behind many of the things here are totally, we're talking about real pagan Avodah Zarah. So the question really stands, a very important question. The Rambam didn't bother telling you the reason because he believes that things change with the weather. What's the use of telling me how I explained it today? You're going to find a new reason in your period of time. Not a new reason. Because the reason must lie in the historical reality at the time. Because the source of the Chokhmah is the Girgashi farmer. But how can you retranslate that value into something which will facilitate your behavior today? That's a serious job. So when we look at Taamei Hamitzvos, we're not looking at something easy. We're looking at once we first we have to understand what are the Taamim at the period. Then you have to to be able to translate that into a value which is pertinent for your private religious development. That's what's coming out of between Rambam Hilchos Me'ila and this Rambam in the Chelik Gimel Perek Lamed Aleph. That should be enough for the evening. We'll continue this next week. This is a hard sugya. I don't know how to tell it to you. Okay, keep your pages and bring it back next week. Thank you.